Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Our first map starts off with the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation, and much of the story of the last 7 days was dominated by Hurricane Ian. Now, we discussed in detail, especially in the morning reports, just the challenges in forecasting this hurricane. Biggest surprises were the Panhandle of Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, and we just kept seeing the rain that was expected to fall in this area change as that frontal boundary that sat right in here just continued to steer Ian across parts of Florida. Now, we still have 500,000 people in Florida without power, and we saw over the weekend from North and South Carolina, parts of Virginia, some places here, even into West Virginia, picked up between 3 and 8 inches of total rainfall, and it's still raining in this area today. But now that Ian is finally offshore, and the effects are done, and we're going to just sit here and begin the cleanup process, which more than likely Ian will become one of our top 10 most expensive disasters in U.S. history. We take a look at what's been going on after this now to the west of Ian, and that would be this large area in the middle part of the country that's been very dry. Now, the dryness in the central part of the United States has been a problem all summer. This next map looks at the time period of July 1 to October 3rd this morning, and it kind of puts a rank in terms of total accumulated precipitation over that time period, going back 130 years. And parts of Kansas, parts of Nebraska, parts of Oklahoma and Texas are having like a top 10, in some cases the second driest on record, like this climate reporting district in Kansas right here. And that's not to take away from the drought that the very dry conditions we saw this summer in parts of the Pacific Northwest. We had an active southwest monsoon. We had major precipitation events like the flooding in parts of eastern Kentucky, southeastern Illinois, near St. Louis, or the flooding that was over here in the middle of summer that hit Death Valley. So that's not to take away from those events or the truly monstrous flooding that came through here across a broad sector about a month ago. What I'm focusing on here is that the overall water health in the midsection of the country has largely been depleted despite some of these very big rainfall events. And the ridging we've seen as of late gives us this latest soil moisture map. You can tell that most of the Mississippi watershed, which includes the Missouri, the Ohio, big rivers that run through the midsection of the country, have as of late been very dry. The soil is very dry. Much of the center part of the United States, which has enjoyed wide open harvesting windows, is also starting to see the effects of being so dry for such a long time period. So the questions I got today, in fact, I had 3 separate people email me all asking for the same thing, was to talk a little bit about the water levels in the big river system. So I'm just going to pick one, but I'm going to show you all how to access this for any nearby river. So I'm going to link this particular page right here in the description below. And what you can do with this is a hyperlinked map. So I live in the state of Illinois, so I clicked on Illinois here, and it brought up this. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come over here to the statewide stream flow and click on that. And what it does is it's going to list out all of the USGS river gauges. Now I live in Champaign County, and I'm very close to the Sangamon River. So I'm going to click on that. Fisher, Illinois is just north of me. So when I click on this, what you end up getting is this new page. Now don't yet scroll down. I want you to go up here. It says we're replacing this page with the next generation monitoring. That's the one I want you to click on. Because what it'll do is it'll make a much more interactive graph for you to look at. And what I want you to do right away is at the top, you're at a 7-day window on this graphic. You have a 30-day option, and you also have a 1-year option. Now, in Champaign County this summer, we dealt with a lot of drought issues. And it's interesting to see the rivers respond. So this now goes back a full year, so all the way to last fall. And you can see some of the spring rains we had, but then notice just the decline in the river value and the river gauge depth, that we saw all the way now into September. All right. Now, the questions I was getting asked about was not for the Sangamon River, but for the Mississippi. And I'm just going to show you 2 examples of this because we've been hearing reports about issues with barge traffic. So we're going to go to Memphis first. Now, what's interesting about where this particular gauge is in Memphis, I'm just going to show you. They have maps down here at the bottom. Can you see how this gauge is right here next to the river's edge? Now, I show you that because currently the gauge height is down here around you can see around -8 feet. And the minimum operating limit is actually -8 feet at this level. But you can see the effect of the drought in the Mid-South impacting the river gauge height going forward. Now that's at at Memphis. I wanted to keep going down the river, and the next place I want to show you down here is in Natchez. I think that's how you say that. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. But where you are, I was kind of zoomed in on this map before we got started. We're pretty far south here in Mississippi. So I'm really trying to gauge what's going on from Louisiana to Mississippi to Arkansas to southern Illinois, Missouri. And so we're right down here at this gauge. And again, since the data has been collected here, the river gauge is at once at 43 feet, and it's now down here much lower at 13 feet. So this is just a resource to help answer some of those questions about barge traffic issues when we've been so very dry. So the first big question we're going to ask is, do we see precipitation coming through the midsection of the country? What about the west? And are there any more tropical systems coming right now to the east? I'm going to answer that last question first. The answer right now is no. The two systems we're watching out in the open Atlantic, neither right now has a high probability of hitting the east coast or the Gulf Coast, so we're going to leave that off the table in this report. What we're going to come back to is this. In the last 30 days, you're looking at a map showing you the percent of normal precipitation. And during that time period, much of the South and Mid-South, large sections here of the Midwest, the Plains, the Corn Belt, have seen far more drier days than they've seen wetter days. And there are some places in Texas and Oklahoma that, according to the AHPS data, which comes from NOAA, has not had any precipitation. So we're balancing this whole act across the United States, places that have been extremely wet, like from Ian, and then places to the west of there that have been so very dry. We can see it right now today on satellite. This is what's left of Ian. It's made a full subtropical transformation, so it's no longer tropical and characteristic. And as I go back throughout the day today, we can just see how that particular system is, as the sun's getting ready to set, continuing to linger just off coast. There's no strong steering wind to yank this thing out to open ocean just yet. And that's where we're continuing to see the cloud cover and some rain in and around parts of Virginia, West Virginia, but really Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, parts of Pennsylvania are still seeing some of this rainfall. The system that followed it had so much more potential than you're actually realizing. It did deliver rain to Montana and Wyoming and then parts of the western and high plains here. But it's been starved of moisture, and one of the big reasons for that has been because of Ian. The high pressures to the north of it rather than to the south were not advecting or moving that moisture into this frontal boundary that's coming through. So just thinking about that, let's do a quick forecast of where these two systems are going. And we're going to look at that by going straight to the high-res NAM model from this afternoon. So what we see here is one low, Ian, high pressure in between. As we just play this through the night tonight, getting into Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon and evening, that front does come through parts of the Midwest, strings all the way back to parts of Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and it could deliver just a broken band of showers. Is it going to be overly wet? No. Some places may pick up a half inch, but other than that, it's going to be relatively dry. It could deliver a little bit of rainfall into parts of Iowa that could slow down harvest, but I'm just not seeing much out of this. It won't really be until Tuesday night that Ian is fully offshore and no longer an issue, but at that point, this front broke up, doesn't deliver much rainfall, and the main low is now getting absorbed into this deep Hudson low. Now, what I want to show you after this is a map. I haven't shown you this in a while, but it's one you're very familiar with. It's a dew point map. The dew point temperature is just a gauge on how much moisture is in the atmosphere. And what I want you to notice is this system that's sitting here today, do you see all the very dry air that is in place between it and the Gulf? That's the reason why it's unable to really produce much in the way of precipitation. And it just stays too dry. There's just not enough moisture there. Now later this week, this is Wednesday evening, there's a very cold and very dry air mass that's extending here out of the Canadian prairie, brought in by a deeper trough, and that is going to dive by Thursday, getting into Friday and Saturday, providing very dry conditions, but also the risk of extensive frost, which we're going to talk about in a few moments. And that's just the first of these. That one comes plowing through, keeping things relatively drier. And then I'm watching out there beyond that, maybe around Monday the 10th, getting toward the 11th and 12th, the potential of another system to develop. Got to talk more about it. But then you'll see at the very end of this forecast, look at the big push of dry air that comes in behind it. Now, we are out there really far with a single model run. This is nearly a 10-day forecast from the European. We're not looking at the ensemble, so error will be high. But we've been watching this develop, and I want to talk about that, all right? So the story really comes down to looking at the upper level flow. I want to take you back to what I was looking at earlier today. So the most important feature in the near term is this. If you watched my videos last week, one of the things I talked about was we were anticipating the jet to extend across the Pacific and really increase the late October chances for more frequent storm systems. Well, this little break off here of this cutoff low is extending that time period I was worried about beyond where it currently is. And that's because the flow's got to go around that. So it breaks across the top, it runs around the bottom of it, and the flow comes through the United States like this. So this is what delivers upper level convergence, higher pressure, drier conditions. And we see that being in place not only through the end of this week, but going out there into early next week. Now, we're looking at the GFS ensemble to start with here. But what I'm noticing here is that as we get out there to next Tuesday and next Wednesday, there is some model agreement that coming around this large ridge, as this low slowly gets absorbed back into the flow, that there's going to be a shortwave trough that sneaks through here. Now, we often use the ensembles to give confidence to the individual model runs. But the individual model runs, when we get out there, I don't know, let's just stop this next Tuesday night. They look something like this. And that is a substantially deep trough that sweeps through the United States. And on its downwind side, the divergent quadrant of this trough, we should expect to see a pretty decent low. Now, this is the European solution. This is what the GFS shows. There's still a trough in place there. Again, here's the European, here's the GFS. The GFS is just shallower. It's not as deep of a trough. But both models are attempting to produce a system that could disrupt harvest in the midsection of the country. And that's ultimately one of our three big questions for today. So I want to go show it to you. We have already watched through, let's go here, the European model play out to Wednesday. Let's get out there to where the high-res model left off. So here it is, Thursday. Now at this point, the big feature will be this high-pressure cell on Thursday sinking through right there, pushing its way into the upper Midwest and northern plains, delivering some really cold air. Could there be some showers around the periphery? Sure. Could there be rainfall that's coming out of the southwest? Absolutely, because the flow is coming around it, pulling that moisture in that area. But that large dome of high pressure, all on that convergent flow in the jet stream, is going to really knock these temperatures back in a big way for this weekend. That's what's bringing in the drier air. You'll notice that as the high settles here over the eastern Corn Belt, the flow delivers more moisture into Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado. Now, what we were watching was after this. Remember, it's that Monday, Tuesday. And so here comes the system I'm keeping an eye on. There it is on Sunday night. And while it's forming here, we do see on Monday a frontal boundary starting to develop. And there's moisture pushing up against that. The lead wave is diving right at this point here along the northern Rockies and parts of Alberta and British Columbia. And what we now see is that the model, see it there, is attempting next Tuesday and Wednesday to deliver a pretty potent system in the midsection of the country. Interestingly enough, it's on kind of the 1-year anniversary of the system that disrupted harvest in a major way in 2021. These are in two entirely different systems, the one from last year and the one from this year. That one hit on October 13th. You remember that one? Just delivered a ton of rain. It was the remnants of a typhoon. That's not what this is. But this is the first hint we've seen in the models of something substantial coming through when we get out there to next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, that time frame. So is it in the GFS? Well, let's play quickly and see. Here's going through this Wednesday and Thursday. There's that same dome of high air pressure. That's the one bringing in the cold weather. You then see the return of moisture of the Four Corner States, just like the European model had. And then we see, here it is, some system taking shape Tuesday and Wednesday. How disruptive it's going to be, how much moisture it gets, all of that is still something we have yet to discover. So we're just getting our first kind of hints that this system could exist and that it could be potentially disruptive to harvest. But you know that between now and then, we'll take a look. This is total accumulated precipitation through the next 5 days. All of this is coming in the next 36 hours, and it's going to be widely scattered. Outside of that, nothing. But the models are attempting, watch, here comes Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That's that next system pulling through. So that's how many days out until we see something that could really truly be disruptive to harvest. Until then, the issue comes down to who's been very dry, who has the risk of field fires, what's going on with the river gauges. All of that is going to be a discussion because we're talking about middle of the month now before we see this potentially disruptive system coming through. Now, when we look out there at what the full week 2 forecast looks like from the ensembles, they have yet to hone in on this. So it is only in the newest operational runs that that system is really manifesting itself. The ensembles, when you look out there at week 2, do you see how there's not strong anomalies one way or the other? This is because of a lot of model spread, meaning that system I'm concerned about is not well resolved just yet. What we do have confidence on in the near term is the extent of frost with the system that comes through on Thursday and Friday. So this map shows you locations with frost potential through the next 7 days. And this is getting pretty far south into northern Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, even hitting parts of Kentucky. In terms of timing, this is a week to 10 days early for the area I'm kind of hovering over here, and maybe up to 2 weeks early in parts of Kentucky. So this is some really cold air that's sliding in. Let's get an idea on the timing of it. We've already seen today's high temperatures. Let's get into tomorrow on Tuesday. So a nice warm chunk of air that's out ahead of this next system. The cool air here still from rain-cooled air and cloud cover from Ian. But as we get into Wednesday, broad warmth across much of the country. Only parts of the mid-Atlantic to the southeast and where the rain's coming into New Mexico do things look colder than normal. But the highly amplified pattern brings the heat west, digs the trough into the midsection of the country, and this will be the first morning that we see the substantial cool down across much of the western Corn Belt and upper Midwest and parts of the northern plains. By Friday, that cold air advances even farther. So in some places, this is looking like 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit colder than normal. As we then go into Saturday, the cooler air presses east, and Sunday continues. During this whole time, the west stays quite warm. Now beyond that, let's go out and look at the models here. This is the European ensemble. It's got that cooler air east and the warmer air west. Why we continue to stay warmer west all the way through the middle of the month is the forecast models are just taking their dear sweet time absorbing that trough that I mentioned that's south of Alaska back into the flow. So before it does that, it's just going to keep higher heights and ridging here, and that's associated with the warmth. So the west is going to buy time. But much of the midsection of the country has multiple shots at cooler air coming in through the end of the month, even though we're not seeing it shown up really well in the ensembles at this point. So I'm going to give you some evidence as to why I think that's going to be the case. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look here. In my last 2 videos last week, one of the things I told you I was concerned about is once we get to the middle of this month, I need to be watching for an extension of the Pacific jet. And what I'm particularly curious about is that the current state of La Niña is pushing strong trades here. It's giving us westerly wind bursts there and a lot of rising motion here, which gets exhausted and helps extend this jet out. And normally in October, when we get a jet extension due to La Niña putting the MJO in phase 5, we get troughs of low pressure here. And we're starting to see the beginnings of that. But these troughs of low pressure need to continue to move toward the United States to really increase the rainfall chances in this area. I just put the oval around. And my concern was that that was going to happen. So I'll be watching this mid-month to see if this jet extends. At this point, La Niña is raging. I mean, this is the strongest I can remember, looking back over the last few years at seeing the upwelling here. And again, these trades. Now I'm just going to restate something I told you in the last few weeks. When this La Niña begins its breakup, and we've talked about that a lot lately, when that starts to happen, which I think will be December, January, February, in that time frame, this will be your first clue. You will start to see the blue-greens here, which represent those very strong trade winds, begin to back off consistently. The westerly wind bursts in the Indian Ocean back off consistently, and the MJO pops out and doesn't get stuck here or in phase 5 or 6, but starts to progress and move around. And at that point, we will know that this La Niña has let go, its grip has been relinquished, and other subseasonal factors will start to take over. Now, as it stands, the whole pattern is really favoring MJO phase 5 and 6, and all of that is just driven by these strong trades. So we look out there and we say, well, what about mid-October to mid-November? If that develops an extended piece of the Pacific jet and troughing off the northwest coast, then that tends to deliver early rainfall to parts of Oregon, Washington, Northern California, and the inner side here of the Pacific Northwest. This sends systems through the northern plains of the United States, through the Midwest. But the only place that can consistently show up drier is going to be from Texas over to the Mid-Atlantic. But that would just be a little drier than normal. So my point here, and this was kind of my main point at the beginning, was I think we're going to continue to see open harvest windows until that potential system middle of next week. Let's call it middle of next week. And then after that, we're going to have to wait till that 3rd and 4th week of October for the pattern to start to shift into November to start to deliver more frequent systems. And all of that is to say, if there's a window to go now, it just seems from the atmospheric science perspective of this only that it seems like a go. Now, CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, also released their latest outlook for October, and it's what's shown to you here. Now, they released this last Friday, and that's why you continue to see the very wet conditions here. They had to incorporate what was left to be in. They also saw the higher pressure in between. That's what drew in the moisture here to bring it into the Four Corner States. But most of their forecast, I could argue, is biased toward the first 15 days or so of the month, which is why we see drier conditions here and overall broader warmth. Does not mean there won't be cold days, like we got one coming up this Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then we got another shot of that cool air coming in. But they're trying to keep more ridging in the west, and I get it. I understand why they're doing that. I do not think that this map is going to verify once we get past that 3rd week of October. That's when I'm expecting the changes. All right. So from here, what I want to talk about now is South America. And I was just watching some satellite imagery today, and I'm just noticing a few things. When we've had systems roll through Argentina, they've not delivered moisture. We've had stalled fronts that have been farther to the north, like Mato Grosso do Sul over toward Paraná. And we've seen active convection, like you see here, which is associated with the monsoonal season. It's going. Now, when we look at the problems that Argentina's been having with drought, I just went back over the month of September and looked at jet stream level winds, because it's the jet stream that drives the weather systems in Argentina, much like it does the United States. There's been anomalous easterly flow here and stronger than normal westerly flow there. They have a westerly wind belt down there. And what's interesting about this has been this large ridge of high pressure that's sat here, and the flow coming over the mountains and making the turn like this. You see, the issue with that flow is that this doesn't draw the right amount of moisture into Argentina. And because of that, we've seen this map, which means when you look at the total precipitable water, that's how much moisture is in the atmosphere to produce rain. We've just seen it being robbed from this area. No good moisture return for parts of Argentina, and that's why we've seen such drought settle in there. It's been much wetter here, and we're still waiting on the monsoon to arrive there. So NDVI imagery would show you that there are places here that should be greening up in spring, and the NDVI values through parts of central Argentina over toward the Paraná River back to Buenos Aires are very, very low. Whereas north of it, from Rio Grande do Sul, you can't see it over Paraná. There's cloud contamination in here. That's these dark spots. But getting into Mato Grosso do Sul and Mato Grosso, we're starting to see these colors really brighten up, indicating the effect of that rain. What's the long-range forecast look like? This is the next 45 days, according to the European model. They continue to stress more drought conditions south, especially into Argentina, which has been the source of major concern going forward. But the wetter conditions across Brazil's central, northern, and eastern growing areas suggest a very fast planting progress for soybeans. And I was just looking at that from Mato Grosso, and this is where we're going to finish up today. They're currently at 6.29%. A year ago, 6.16. The 5-year average is 1.8, so we're above normal. The likelihood, I think, of continuing to follow this side of this envelope is very high through the next 3 to 4 weeks, meaning the crop will likely go in quite quickly. After that, it's all going to be about how this La Niña continues to transition. And so I guess one last graph. Let's go CFS V2. Let's go look at the latest update for La Niña. And you continue to see that starting in the new year, the potential is there for this to collapse. So let's watch for it, see what it does to our pattern, all right? Hey, appreciate Eric's attention tonight on Monday night. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.